Good evening. I'm Max Angerholzer, and greetings from the Bush Center on the campus of Texas A&M University in College Station. On behalf of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, thank you all so much for joining us for what will be a very interesting and exciting virtual event with Dana Perino featuring her new book, Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women. It'll be moderated by my friend Mary Kate Cary. First, I want to thank our outstanding staff at the Foundation for making tonight possible. And also want to say what a pleasure it is to work with our colleagues at the Bush Library and the Bush School every day. While I may not be the main target audience of Dana's new book, as a girl dad, I'm very excited to be part of this event tonight. And the book, as you'll find if you haven't read it yet, has a lot of great lessons for young women about confidence and resilience and empowerment. So it's an extraordinary book, and you're going to hear more about it this evening. Now it's my privilege to introduce Mary Kate Cary. Not only is she an amazing person, but she's had an incredible career in strategic communications and politics. During the George H.W. Bush administration, she worked in the White House as a speechwriter and was involved in more than 100 speeches that the president gave. She later served as a spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney General. Since she left the Bush White House, she has advised countless companies, not-for-profits, mission-based organizations, and has been an extraordinary leader in her field. She also, and I encourage you to find this online, I think it's also on our website, she created and was the executive producer of an amazing documentary film, 41 on 41, which aired originally on CNN, and it's 41 interviews with extraordinary people telling some of their favorite stories about George H.W. Bush. So it is a treasure of a documentary, and I'd encourage you to find that. I would also like to add, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, Mary Kate is a proud graduate of the University of Virginia. She has spent a lot of time on the corner there at some of her favorite establishments and watering holes. She also is a professor at UVA now, and she is a senior fellow at the Great Miller Center. So Mary Kate, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Max. That's quite an introduction. On behalf of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation and the advisory council that I'm on, I'd like to welcome everyone to our conversation tonight with one of the world's most interesting women, Dana Perino. Dana is a Fox News anchor, a co-host of The Five, an analyst for election night coverage and specials, and a New York Times #1 best-selling author. She's also the former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush, where she was the first Republican woman to hold that job. She served for over 7 years in the administration, including at the Department of Justice after the 9/11 attacks. Dana grew up in Wyoming and Colorado and has lived in all kinds of places, from California to England, and she now resides in Manhattan with her husband, Peter, and her very famous dog, Jasper. Dana's here to talk about her new book, as Max mentioned, Everything Will Be Okay, Life Lessons for Young Women, from a former young woman, which is what I am also, a former young woman. So welcome, Dana. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
It's
I'm
great
going
to
to
see
let
you.
the dog go in just a moment, but
okay.
Everybody could catch Jasper.
But
He's a
there
little
he
tired. He was on America's Newsroom this morning as we opened back up in New York, so he was there to help us do that. And now he's falling asleep. So next time he goes to go to bed, I will allow that. But I wanted everyone to see him. Thanks for having me. I wish I could be there in person. Maybe next year we'll make it happen.
Yeah, we'd love it.
Thank you all for joining me. I think your library has been so supportive of me, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry that I'm in this really ugly background because it's so sunny in New York. I couldn't be in the other room. And you know, in New York, you only have 2 rooms. So
right.
This is where I am. I'm in this little room and there's not much decoration.
No, it looks great. And hopefully we can get you down to College Station soon and have a fun time. So I've got all kinds of questions for you, but let's start sort of at the beginning with, what inspired you to write this book rather than say your memoirs or, some kind of, crisis communications type of book, because you're certainly an expert on that. What made you want to write about young women and what they can do?
Well, one of the great things about having the opportunities that I had at the White House and now at Fox News, and when you're the first, that sometimes matters, as that's the first Republican woman to hold that job. Now there's many Republican women have had the job. And another Democratic woman has had the job. So I think that glass ceiling has been firmly shattered. But in my first book I wrote in 2015, it was basically answering the question of how does somebody from Wyoming with no political connections, no money, end up, in Washington, D.C. after 9/11 and the White House press secretary at the end of the Bush 43 administration. And what I did, one of the things I did in that book was peel back the curtain to talk about what it was like to work with 43 when no cameras were there. Mm-hmm. And I told some great stories that I wanted other people to know but they wouldn't have seen them because, of course, we had had those things behind the scenes. But I also included, Mary Kate, the chapter 5, and I thought that it was all of my mentoring advice in one place. But that was the chapter that for the last several years has just kept coming back over and over again, with people saying that book helped me so much, or it helped my daughter, and people asking, when are you going to write another one? I could use more of that advice. And I really resisted because I didn't feel like I had enough to say for a while. But over time, I realized that I actually did have a lot more mentoring advice to provide. And I wanted to take it beyond just what you can do in your day-to-day career to make things better. But then how do you take those worries and anxieties from the quarter life crisis that I find are following young women into their 30s and beyond, and transition into a position of leadership or management or maybe entrepreneurship? And then the third prong of the stool is how can you do that all in a way that provides you with more of what I call God's gift to us, which is serenity moments. And I, as a young woman who worried away my 20s, I don't want other young women to do that. It's not necessary. And when I write that everything will be okay, I truly believe that, but it takes a heck of a lot of work for everything to be okay. Mm-hmm. But I would never tell a young woman, you worry too much, because if you do that, for all the girl dads out there, you might take this to heart. You might live this in your own household. Young women then will just add that to the list of things that they think is wrong with them.
Yeah. But
you can take worry and anxiety and convert it into fuel that is productive for you. So I spent the year on weekends, because I didn't really have the time, writing the book. And then I actually had the title before I had the finished product. And then when the book came out, March 9th, that was about 4 days before the first big national lockdown for the pandemic. And I realized, oh my gosh, it is the right book at the right time, with a message that several young women have said to me, like, I really needed to hear that everything will be okay. And it's really speaking to them in terms of they feel in their heads that they're the only ones worried about these things that they have in their minds. And when they read it, they'll say, I feel like you were speaking just to me. And I will tell them that, well, there's strength in numbers, and that's why you need to help each other and work together to make all that happen. The last thing I'd point out is just in the last 48 hours, I've had 3 people say that the book was an inspiration for them, the kick in the pants that they needed to go for a new position. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of them achieved their goal.
Wow.
So I feel like we're making a little progress.
That must make you feel great.
It really does, because, I mean, it makes it all worth it, right?
Yeah. Well, it seems like you've touched on so many things that are in the book, and I completely agree with you. I can understand not only the 25 and 30-year-olds saying, oh, this isn't just me. Other people worry like this too. But from my point of view, as the mother of 2 20-something girls, I think, oh, I'm not the only mother who is thinking these things of what to say to these girls. And anyway, so we can get to that. I think that I thought maybe I would start, since there's so many people on this call who are big fans of George and Barbara Bush, that I thought I'd start with that, because that's kind of the fun stuff. So let me ask you about them. You have a great story in the book about Barbara Bush and her advice about something that you guys both had in common, which was that both you and Barbara Bush have lived in a tremendous number of places and had to move a lot. And you have this story, I should tee it up for you there, that when she got told by George H.W. Bush that they were going to move to Houston from Midland,
Yeah.
So why don't you tell that story? I think that's a great story.
So this lesson comes in a couple of different ways. So one of my favorite pieces of advice for people is don't be afraid to move. You know, when you come from a smaller town, America, you'll hear a lot. They don't want to lose their young people.
Right.
They're afraid they're going to go to the city and never come back. So there's pressure to stay close.
Yep.
And I didn't have that pressure in my own life, but I saw it. And I believe that living in all of these different places has really helped me. But I also love the idea that the Bush is really embodied, which is to, as Jean Becker told me today on a podcast I did with her, just reminding me that they decided to love their lives and that you get a choice to do that. And how you approach difficulties or opportunities or a fork in the road really matters. And the story that you're talking about that I loved was when Barbara Bush is living with the kids in Midland, and 41 is traveling a little bit back and forth to Houston, and he's working in the oil business. And I hope I get this story right. I mean, there are people on here who might know this even better than I do. And 41 comes home one day to Midland, and Barbara Bush had finally felt very settled there. You know, she had grown up, of course, on the East Coast, but now she's living in Midland, and she had friends, and the kids are in school, and they're really pulled together as a family. And 41 says, I've decided I'm going to be going into the offshore oil business. And in order to do that, that means that we're going to be moving to Houston.
Yeah, Midland is not offshore. Midland is
right.
to get closer to the water. Yeah.
Action. And Barbara Bush said that all these thoughts went through her head of like, oh my gosh, but I love it here, and all my friends are here, and blah, blah, blah. But that she said, that's wonderful. I've always wanted to live in Houston, and gave the support that he needed to. I mean, I'm sure he was already feeling like, oh gosh, I got to uproot this family and move them all the way to Houston. But it was just something that she said, I'm going to decide to embrace this. And she did. And then, of course, now we know that over time, Houston also became the favored place where she had lots of friends and connections.
Yeah, center of their lives, really, in a lot of ways. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that, of you can choose to be happy or you can choose to be miserable. And I try to choose to be happy whenever I'm given the choice. Sometimes you can't, but Barbara Bush was certainly that way. And I think you moved many times, sometimes for a job and sometimes for love.
Yeah.
And it's okay to move for love, right?
I was living in DC. I write a little bit about the dating scene in DC, and apparently nothing has changed since I was there and dating in the mid-90s. It's just a hard place. I know that a lot of great marriages and relationships and certainly friendships for me have been found in Washington, D.C., but I think I went for like 2 years, like not dating anyone, not even being asked on a date. And in my church group, my singles group, this one woman who I just adored, she took me aside one night. I was had all sorts of worries. Like I was about 25. What was I going to do? My life's turn out the way it's supposed to. Should I move on? Should I leave Washington, D.C.? Should I pursue something else? And I thought I would find someone. She's like, whoa, wait. She's like, remember what the Lord says. He says, fear not. And that you are written on the palm of his hand, and you will never be forgotten. And if you can let some of this go, everything will get a little bit better. It took a couple of months, and then I sort of relaxed. Now, that conversation with her was in the May, because I remember it was my birthday. I was 25. And then in the August, I had to go on a trip with the congressman back to Denver, where we were going to do some editorial boards with the Rocky Mountain News, Denver Post, things like that. And I was flying home. I almost missed the flight. My husband almost took an earlier flight, but we were assigned seats next to each other on a flight from Denver to Chicago. And we fell in love on the plane. We call it love at first flight. But there were so many reasons why it shouldn't have worked out, because obviously he lived in England. We almost missed the flight. He's 18 years older than me. Did I mention he lives in England? And we were just totally in love. I couldn't even eat. I couldn't sleep, drink. I couldn't read, couldn't concentrate. And we, pretty early on, I think within a few weeks of this long distance relationship, and then he comes back to America, we're like, we decided we want to be together. But then I had to get over the worries that if I left America for a while to live in England, that my career would never recover. And I really believed that. I thought, and just like as I believed when I left journalism, that I would never get to work in television again if I went and worked in DC for a while. And when I look back at all of those opportunities, being willing to take a risk, and the Bushes would talk about this a lot, right? You need Americans to be willing to take a risk. Look at 41, took a lot of risk. 43, the same, like all of their family. And 43 used to talk a lot about the need for Americans not to be risk averse. So I took the plunge and I went to England. A girlfriend of mine said, do not give up on this opportunity to be loved. And one of my favorite pieces of advice in the book is, choosing to be loved is not a career limiting decision. When I finished reading the audio book, doing that recording, I realized, like, wow, there is a lot about Peter in this book. And I could not have done any of this without him.
No, that's a good thing that Peter's in the book, I think.
Yeah.
I listened to the audio version.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it was great. But you're right. He pops in from time to time, and it's very sweet. It's you guys are a great team, I think. It sounds like.
Yes, we are.
So you mentioned 41, and one of the things that I've really admire about George H.W. Bush is his sense of loyalty, integrity, being true to yourself. He's the same person whether he's with the landscapers working in the yard or the Queen of England, and so you touch on that in the book, where there are situations where young women are asked to say something on behalf of the boss publicly that they disagree with, or things like that. How do you help young people feel true to themselves in various work situations where they're not always comfortable with what they're being asked to do professionally?
I start the book with a story that I'll tell in a moment, but I would say all throughout, the main theme is that your integrity is your most valuable asset, and only you can protect it.
Yep. And
you have to guard it. You have to enhance it. Like, that is your responsibility, and you have to protect it at all costs. It's interesting that you bring that up. Obviously, it's a big part of the book, but the story was this young woman from DC called me one day, asked if she could have 5 minutes on the phone, and she's uncomfortable because the congressman that she worked for, the chief of staff, wanted her to issue a statement in her name that she thought was unproductive, unhelpful, undignified, ungracious, all of those things. And she didn't want to have her name out there on it. So she's telling me this, and I said, well, then absolutely don't do it. And she was concerned that she would either lose her job or access to the boss in the office if she refused. And she said, I don't think I can do that because I'm not Dana Perino.
Right. Easy for you to say, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I said, well, how do you think I became Dana Perino? This realization was like, oh, I see. I said, let's talk it through. Could the statement go out in the chief of staff's name? And, does that work? What's interesting, though, is that in the book process, there were a couple of people, men, who, and I'm not disparaging that, I'm just going to give you a story. That part of the book, which is the introduction of the book, at one point it was in a different chapter in the book. When the edits came back in August, there was a suggestion agreed to by both of them that story should come out, because they felt that the way it was written, that the story made me sound arrogant, and that it wasn't in keeping with the tone of the book. And I thought, wow, arrogant. Woo. Like the worst thing. I don't want to be called arrogant. So I slept on it, and I thought, wow, okay, I guess I'll take that part out. But when I woke up, it was still on my mind. And I thought, wait, that story is the whole purpose of why I wrote this book. Because when she called me and I said that, and she realizes that, oh, she too can stick up for herself and do the right thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up I took it out of that chapter, but I made it the introduction of the book instead.
Yeah, you don't have to be, famous and important and things like that to stick up for yourself.
No.
And, there's ways to do it gracefully And it sounds like this young woman did it very gracefully, and she did
Get
not,
out. I mean, I
she
know
didn't
that
get fired. She lived, right?
I'll tell you a story. I know that it's scary. And this wasn't, I would never have been asked to say something that I was not comfortable with. But I will tell you one story. It was towards the end of the Bush 43 administration. We were on the Marine One. There were several other staffers there, senior staffers, just a few on the bench there. And a gay marriage decision had just come down in Connecticut. And I can't remember if it was pro-gay marriage or anti-gay marriage. I can't remember. But whatever it was about October of 2008. And the political team wanted me to put out a statement saying that this is outrageous, whatever it was. And because at the time, in the government's position and the president's position, was that marriage was between a man and a woman. And now it's October 2008. We're in the middle of the financial crisis. This gay marriage issue is ping pong, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was sitting there, and 43 didn't know that this issue had just come up. So we're all on our Blackberries and like emailing each other on the flight. And he sees what's going on. And he's like, what's happening? So I briefed him quickly, told him what's going on. And I said, and they want me to put out a statement that says whatever. And they think it would be helpful to the Republicans that are running in these House seats. And the president asked to see the statement. I hand my Blackberry to him. He hands it back. And then he looks at all of those guys and he says, shouldn't have to do that ever.
Yep.
And he knew I didn't want to. And he respected that, and he stuck up for me. And I'll never forget that.
It's interesting. I get asked this as a speechwriter all the time. Have you ever had to write a speech that you disagreed with morally? And what did you do? And I say, well, you don't usually sign up to write speeches for people that you disagree with morally. So I would never put myself in that situation. I would find someone else to write that speech. Right. And not because it's about me, it's because you're going to be less persuasive and not do as good a job. And so if he had said, President Bush 43 had said, Dana, I know you disagree with this, but if you could go out and please make the case for this, I'd really appreciate it. I kind of think he realizes you would not have, your heart wouldn't have been in it, and you wouldn't have been able to do a good job. So why put you in that situation for his own reasons,
Yeah, I think of how they cultivated staff and relationships and supported staff. I remember one time the Israelis were coming. It was the prime minister. He was coming to complain about Condi Rice. Well, I mean, he might not put it that way, but that's basically what they were doing. They thought there was daylight between what Condi was telling them and what the president believed. So they wanted to have a meeting with the president. So in the pre-brief, Condi tells them all of this. And then when we sat down, they hadn't gotten 2 words out when he said, let me just cut to the chase. There's never daylight between she and me. We will, or she and I, we will always agree. And so if you think that, put it out of your mind, because if she's speaking to you, it's coming from me. And then it was pretty much like, I think this meeting's over.
Yeah.
It's so great.
And that's what's so, the Bushes are loyalty goes up as well as down, and he's loyal to people like that for a reason,
So much.
So what would you say, either from President Bush 43 or someone else, what do you think the most valuable thing is that you learned at the White House while you were there? In terms of, kind of the way anything that changed the way you've lived your life, or anything that was really eye-opening to you?
Sure. I do think that the example that they set in their marriages, both the 41s and the 43s, I think was very helpful to me as sort of kind of newly married and making our way through, and that mutual respect and the humor and the joy of life. I think that was super important to watch. Also the power of the integrity and doing unpopular things and making the case for them. I definitely learned that. I learned substance as well. You can never put a price on what you learn at the White House. There's so much of it. But the other thing that they really did for me is there was an opening of my eyes to service So I think that the Points of Light Foundation for me was obviously, it was an impressive organization and important, but I gain even more respect for it, especially when the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief goes into effect. We went to Africa in February of 2008. I got to then see what I had been talking about and all those statistics that I had been spewing about our help and support in Africa and the results and the accomplishments. All of a sudden now I'm seeing it, feeling it, smelling it, being a part of it, watching the smiles, seeing the need. And I was completely taken, to the point that Peter and I volunteered at a PEPFAR site for 2 weeks after I left the White House in South Africa, Fishhook, South Africa. And we continue to be very supportive of several African-based organizations, well, not based organizations, but where those efforts are being done there, including our main one is Mercy Ships. And that's a surgical hospital ship that works on the west coast of Africa. And Peter and I have done that together as a couple for all of these years. And I think that there is something to be said about those bonds that are forged over time in a marriage, when you can feel like you are doing something together that serves your hearts as well. I really learned that from both the 41s and the 43s. I
would say that too, that they're the ones who taught me that it's important to be involved in something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it very worthwhile. I love that. And I think there's just so many things like that about them that I'm glad you said that. And I think someday George W. Bush will get the credit he deserves for what he did in Africa.
And already. You can see it already. Yeah. And then actually,
I'm so glad you're involved in that. That's wonderful.
That work that he spearheaded in Africa is really a little bit of the basis of I shouldn't say a little bit. There is a basis to be made about the vaccine distribution now that our country is well on its way to getting the vaccines out and about, to help vaccinate the rest of the world. That is an obligation that I think we have a moral obligation to do it. And as I see those arguments being presented, it is often PEPFAR that is the example for how and why that should work.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, one more little White House thing is so you and I shared a boss, not at the same time. In the 41 administration, Tony Snow was the chief speechwriter, the late great Tony Snow. And then under 43, he was your boss in the press office, and predecessor in the press office, I should say, as well. But while he was your boss, you have some great stories in the chapter about mentors and about him and what he did for you in your career and some of the advice he gave you. And what I thought was interesting was there's so many young women and men who say, "Oh, I need to get a mentor. Will you mentor me? Will you mentor me?" And your advice is to choose your mentors wisely and see what is it about that person that you admire, and who's in your sort of kitchen cabinet, and what skills do they have, and don't have all your mentors be exactly the same as each other. But tell me what you learned from Tony Snow, and what were some of the things that he did that stood out for you? Because I know you've gotten very involved in Minute Mentoring.
Yeah, I started Minute Mentoring after I left the White House, it's like speed dating, but mentoring for young women. Actually, Barbara Bush came to an event we did in Houston, and she kicked it off. And it was so interesting when we made the request for her to do it, she told Jean Becker, "Well, why would they want me? I've never earned a paycheck in my life."
Oh,
interesting.
She has so much wisdom. Who cares about the paycheck? Yeah.
So she had called 43 and interviewed him about me, and then she called me and interviewed me about him, and then she told these stories about what 43 and I had said about each other. And she said, loyalty goes both ways. So Tony Snow, an amazing, talented, beautiful, gorgeous human with the biggest heart, who had taken any stray animal that came his way. But professionally, for me, a couple of things he did. One, he had no interest in managing the office in terms of like the day-to-day management. And now remember, he's going through cancer treatment at the same time. So I will just tell you, like, since many of you might know Tony Snow, every morning before he basically delegated a lot to me. So he had me manage the staff. I went to senior staff meeting for him because that was an early meeting, 7:30. I briefed the president for the press conferences because he's like, you can do it better than I can. And he was not what I call a boss hog. And I really encourage managers.
Wait, what do you mean by boss hog?
Meaning that, you know how it is in a White House, like sometimes people will just never delegate and allow a deputy to go to a meeting.
Oh, right.
Allow the deputy to like be around the president, or maybe like it's a Saturday afternoon trip just to give a commencement speech. Let the deputy do that.
Right.
And I learned from 43 that if you're a manager, you better have staff that can fill in for you when you're not there. He's like, that's your responsibility. And he felt very strongly about that. So Tony gave me all these opportunities for things I hadn't done yet. So I could do the spokesperson stuff. Now, I wasn't comfortable briefing the press in front of the camera. I was so happy behind the scenes. Like, that's where I wanted to be. And Tony started making me brief as well. And then he had to go in for surgery. And I had to brief for 3 weeks straight.
Wow.
About 4 months after that is when there needed to be a change where he was going to be, able to go and focus on his health and spend some time with his family. And I was elevated to press secretary. Well, on the day before he was leaving, this amazing writer, this great briefer, this human that everyone loved, he came into my office. He said, "How you doing?" I was like, "Well, not very good, because how am I supposed to fill your shoes?" He was 6'5" and I'm 5 feet tall. And like, it just felt so impossible. And he made me stand up. And he put his hands on my shoulders. He made me look him in the eye, and he shook me a little bit. And he said, "You are better at this than you think you are." I didn't really take that to heart too much because I was like, "Oh, but I have to brief on Monday." And I was like panicking. And about 2 weeks later, I was needing to go to do the briefing, but I got caught up in a meeting and I didn't have time to go and get my binder. And all I had were some notes that I had taken by handwritten notes on a piece of paper, looked like chicken scratch. I was going straight from the Oval to the briefing room without all this paper to back me up. And I ended up having like the best briefing I'd ever had. And that night, as I was cleaning up my desk before I left, I thought, oh my gosh, that's what Tony meant. That I don't have to be just like him. I can be myself, and that would be good enough.
That's great advice. Great advice.
It was great. I also heard something so sweet from his wife, Jill, when Tony then was in the hospital and he was unable to speak, but he would watch the briefings every day when he was in the hospital, and he'd get so mad at the reporters that he would throw things on the floor on my behalf, which I thought was such an amazing show of loyalty.
Oh my gosh.
I miss him a lot.
Yeah. And he gave you some,
like his children are all doing, the 3 children are all doing exceedingly well.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
They have stray animals that you keep adding to their list of all the
that's sweet.
to take care of. So they're doing very well.
I love hearing that. Well, so one of the things that I thought was very interesting was towards the end of the book, you start talking about something you referenced when we first started talking about you're worrying all the time, and that you see these young women now who seem to worry all the time, and how you've gotten pretty much past that. It sounds like every once in a while you still have trouble with it, but tell us about that. And you have a whole chapter on serenity, and how do you address that? How do you define serenity? I guess is one way to start with it, but tell us about that.
That's a great question. So I think that you said you have 2 daughters, so you know what this is like. I mean, you watch them, and maybe I wouldn't always voice my concerns to my parents. I think parenting today, I see how my friends parent their kids and how close they are. I'm like, wow, my mom had no idea. If I had a chemistry test the next day, she would never have known. But I just handled things myself. But I was a firstborn daughter, and I had just I wanted the gold star on my chart. I wanted one every single day. Bill Hemmer on America's Newsroom, every day he'll be like, "I'll give you a gold star for that." I'm like, "Thank you," because it's absolutely motivating for me.
It sounds like your parents really did have a chart with gold stars on the fridge, though, right? Literally.
Yeah, gold, red, and blue. And my sister was totally happy to get a blue star. I was like, wow, I would never want a blue star.
I guess that's the equivalent of a bronze medal.
I think so. I think that's, I remember I remember that's how that worked. So I would say also in college, I worried a lot because I had ambition. I wanted to succeed. So I was trying to plan things out, and I just compressed everything, all these experiences. Like if you wanted to work in TV, you really needed to start in radio. Well, instead of waiting until after graduation to work in radio, I started working overnights doing, I was a country music DJ, working Friday and Saturday night, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. minimum wage, but I wanted to get that done. And I was just compressing everything, trying to do everything all at once. Realizing now that it's not that that didn't serve me well, and I'm glad that I was an overnight country music DJ because I discovered Garth Brooks at the Colorado State Fair in 1993. But it follows me, and it follows me to graduate school. And then there was always this like anxiety, worry. And when I look back, every career opportunity that I've had, every advancement has just been something that I never planned for, but I was ready for. And that's what I mean about that. It takes a heck of a lot of work for everything to be okay. On the serenity point, it was important for me to include that in the article. It was a full book.
Right.
When young women come to see me for mentoring, we'll talk about the thing. You're looking for the promotion. You want to move up. You want to move to a different show, whatever it might be. But at the end, I will always ask, what's really going on? And I sit back and I give them a chance. Like it's almost always something about, I'd really like to meet somebody. I'm concerned about, how I'm going to balance my family and this career. Or maybe it's even something a little bit deeper. There's always something else. And
was that the case for you? Was there always something else?
Probably, yeah, sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because I could do the work.
Yeah.
I could learn. I could do the work.
Yeah.
But my mom, when I was growing up, we had the Serenity prayer on a plaque in the hallway, and what I think of serenity as these little glimpses of peace that God gives you, and they are gifts. And for me, I describe it as when everything just feels like exactly the way it's supposed to be. Like you're in the right place at the right time. The world makes sense. And, they're fleeting glimpses. But I do believe that you can find more of them. And along the way in college, I don't know where I got this, and I probably should credit somebody, but I'll just take it as my own, called the Serenity Checklist. And I talk about this in the book, where if you are worried, you take a piece of paper, 3 columns, list your worries or concerns, anxieties on one column. The second column, you mark whether it's something you have control over or not. And for anything you have control over, in the third column, you make a couple of notes of an action item for how you're going to do something about it or not. I mean, deciding not to do something about it is also a decision. I've learned that from my husband. So there was a time when we first moved to San Diego, financial anxiety was a big one for me. I would be worried, like, are we going to be able to pay the bills? And I think that maybe one of the reasons that it's better now is that I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, it helps.
One time I was so worried. We had just moved back from England. I was trying to find a job. Peter was going to start a business. I was in a grocery store and I started having, I don't think it was a panic attack, but I had this like anxiety. And I had that piece of paper with my columns in my back pocket. And I pulled it out in the cereal aisle. And I looked at this piece of paper and I was like, okay, wait, these are the things. And I'm doing this and I have an action plan. I'm like, okay, put it back in my pocket. Carry that around with me until like feel a little bit better. And then you move on, things could be fine for a while. And then maybe you need to make another list. And taking some action so that you can take any of those anxieties or worries and convert it into fuel that is productive for yourself will help you get out of your own way. So if you're looking for the promotion, a relationship, maybe more balance in your life, like you do have control over a lot of these decisions. And deciding to take action can help you make everything be okay.
That's the kind of thing in the book. There's one chapter about just your everyday life that's prior to the Serenity chapter. And the everyday life, some of that advice that you give is so hands-on and so practical. And some of it is specific to young women, but some of it's not. Like some of the ones that jumped out at me were for young women, do not wear Uggs to the office because it looks like you're shuffling around and kind of, lounging around in your yoga
and
pants.
that's a twist on, dress for success.
Right. But it's a little more practical. And
I was like, ladies, honestly, well, what happened was, this young woman, she worked for down the hall from me for 3 years. I never knew her name. She was working in a different department. I probably should have introduced myself now that I say that. But anyway, for 3 years, I would hear her shuffle down the hallway to the copier or to the restroom or to the kitchen and back. And I was like, she's never going to get promoted. She's going to be in that job because she doesn't look like she's ready for it. Now, mind me, that wasn't fair, but it's a little bit of a signal to your boss. Just like I talk about having a 5-minute pickup at your cubicle. If you're in an open office plan, it is essential that you keep that area looking neat, because if the CEO walks by, it will matter. This happened. Lori Bush one time walked by one of my younger staffers' cubicle areas. It wasn't neat, and she was not impressed. And I was like, that's a gender neutral. Just like have the blazer or business suit or whatever on the back of the door. Yeah, that goes for men too. You don't want to. Yeah, that's a great story about a young woman who she was a junior partner at a law firm. It was a Friday, and an emergency court session was called that dealt with one of their clients, and the senior partner had worn jeans that day, and the judge wanted everybody in the courtroom like within an hour, and there was not time to go home, and this young woman was like, I have a suit. Anyway, she got the opportunity, and now she's a senior partner as well. And so you never know when something like that. You never know.
Yeah. My husband's a lawyer, and he always keeps the suit on the back of the door because he says when people get indicted, they don't want to hear the bad news from a guy wearing hoodies or a hoodie. Yeah, or Uggs. But so many of the things like that, as a mom, I'd rather have you saying it about, say, posture. You're a terrific third-party validator for stuff.
Posture is so important.
Posture is huge, but if the mom says it, they don't listen. Yeah,
but you say so much about yourself, and also this past year, everybody's on the computer. Everyone's on their phone.
Everybody's hunched over, and it goes to your confidence. Yeah, I agree.
Totally. Yeah, it is proven. The people with better posture will get more money in terms of their job offer. They will get the promotion or the opportunity to present in front of the board or to go for the new client or go for the travel. So, I mean, you can always give another half an inch to your height. And again, I'm 5 feet tall, so.
But it does go to this, like I was saying, so many of the tips in here are not just for young women. But do you think men should read this book, or do you specifically think it's just for young women because of the title?
No, I don't. And I did struggle. I did think about targeting this to young women when a lot of the advice obviously could be for anybody.
Right.
But the majority of people that do come to me are young women, and the majority of the anxiety that I see, and the problem that I was trying to address, was coming from young women. And what I think is that Trey Gowdy, the former congressman from South Carolina, and now my colleague, he read it and he said he got so much out of it, including like using too many exclamation points in emails.
I was just going to bring that up.
But he also started off his interview with me showing me 2 pictures of his communications directors. And he said, these 2 women were mentored by you because I called you and told you that they admired you and you took the time to do that. And you know what, that meant so much to him.
Isn't that nice?
I thought, that's really coming full circle, but also he's a father of a daughter who they butt heads on all sorts of issues. He's a manager of many young people, and he thought it was very helpful. But I will tell you that I think the girl dads, as Max was saying, he's a girl dad. The girl dads are buying this book for their daughters partly because of the reason you mentioned, that it's better to hear the advice from somebody else. But also I think that the dads should read it too, because it's hard to understand what young women are going through and what they're thinking. When Peter, my husband, finished reading the draft of the book, he said, wow, you all think a lot. you spend more time thinking about what men are thinking than men actually spend thinking. It's just true. It's just the way that we are. And so he also said that men should read the book because then they'll fully understand that they will never fully understand women, but they should keep trying.
He's a very wise man. There were some tips in there that remind me. Have you seen these progressive ads with Dr. Rick, the guy who's counseling older people how to behave themselves in public? And, and there's, to Trey Gowdy's point, there are plenty of tips on sort of social media etiquette. And, obviously we all know don't hit reply all, but you have stuff like don't loop in somebody without
permission.
Right.
No, that is not good.
Yeah. What are some of the other ones like that? Can you give me like your 2 or 3 top ones for people our age, like that you wouldn't know otherwise unless someone told you?
Well, I've come around on emojis because I do think that sometimes an emoji can take the sting out of an email that might be strongly worded, and maybe it doesn't mean to be. Maybe you don't mean it to sound that way. Other times you do. Peter calls it my White House voice. Sometimes I pull that out and use that. I think that also, you have to have a new subject line. If you're never introduce a new topic in an email chain, especially with your boss, that has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Right.
Like, you don't say, oh, we're talking about this Zoom tonight that you're doing the Bush Library, and then add, oh, by the way, can you go to lunch with Sean Desmond next week? Like, that has nothing to do. What are you doing?
Right, because then you can't find it later.
No,
when you search. You can't find it. Yeah.
Subject, and also never. Well, older people wouldn't do this, but I would say that never tell your boss that they're so lucky that they get to go do something.
Oh, right.
That is just like, I don't like that. I earned it. And and you're going to earn it too. But the other point I think is the importance of passing things on, right? So 43's one of his best advice he ever gave me was to ask myself, what was the worst thing that could happen if I started my own business? And I had about 13 things that I thought were, reasons.
Well, this is because, we should tell the viewers, this is because you were about to leave the White House and were thinking about starting your own business, or should you go take a corporate job, right?
We had left the White House and I had joined up with a PR firm for 75.
Oh, that's what it was, right. Okay.
No. And also, frankly, it was working with a lot of Clinton people, and it just didn't work out well.
Yeah.
And I just didn't, I felt too hemmed in, and I wanted independence. But I was reluctant to take the step, and 43 said, well, what's the worst thing that could happen if you did? So I tell him all my reasons, and he's like, yeah, I'm not persuaded by any of that. He's like, you're an educated American woman who was the White House press secretary. If the worst thing that could happen, if your business doesn't succeed, is that you end up working for another PR firm, that is not the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
He's like, so he kind of gave me a nod. I think that one of the things that both 41 and 43 loved to do was career counseling. They just loved it. I mean, that was one of the things that they would love to do. And they would always ask, what's next? What's on the horizon? What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that, because, I didn't have to write this book, but when I finally realized, I'm like, oh, wait, I actually do have something to say. It's definitely been worth all the effort.
And don't you think they would always say, what's next? Because look at their careers.
Totally.
George W., baseball owner, to governor, to president of the United States, and now artist, and H.W. too, just one career change after another, which, I would argue made him one of the most accomplished people to ever run for president of the United States.
I think it was so impressive about both of them, the 41s and the 43s, is they have friends from elementary school and all the friends along the way.
Yeah.
It's just so impressive to me.
They just keep building a bigger and bigger web. It's amazing. Yeah.
And
a lot of it has to do with handwritten notes. Yeah.
But I don't like to say networking, because I think that sounds like you need something from somebody. Just make friends, and then it all works out.
So, one last question is, So we don't have our masks on. We are vaccinated. You know, I can walk around outside now in Washington without a mask on. I feel like the world is opening back up.
Yeah.
I know that the temptation, I think, was that people thought you're writing this book, everything will be okay because of COVID.
Yeah.
But what advice do you have for young people as the economy starts opening back up and they're getting back out of Zoom calls all the time, or starting their own businesses, or, you know, the whole new next chapter, I think, of our national story is about to start again. And
Yeah.
you know, what do you say to young people about that? What's your advice on the post-COVID world?
One, history found you. That's something that Caitlin Flanagan wrote in The Atlantic, and I thought it was such a great point. You know, for these millennials and Generation Z, you know, for me, I would say that my big pivotal moment in history was 9/11. Mm-hmm. And of course, that changes the course of my career as well, but it changes foreign policy, all of those things. A global pandemic is definitely their moment. I would say a couple things. If you are offered the opportunity to go back into the office, take it.
Absolutely.
Something about out of sight, out of mind, it's not your fault. However, I said that on air one day, and then all these young people at Fox were emailing me saying, well, can you ask my boss to let me come back to work? And so some of these companies are just it's taking them a little bit of time to figure out what they're going to do in terms of liability issues and getting people back. Now, maybe you want to work from home. Maybe that works better for you. I just think, here's the thing, your boss is not a mind reader. So you have to talk to your supervisor about what you want to do, what's doable, what can work for you. I think communication on that front is really important. If you are a manager, you have to reach out to your people and have face-to-face communication. People are tired of Zoom, I totally get it, but you have to look somebody in the eye. That's why 43, for example, did secure video teleconference with Karzai and Maliki every Wednesday morning.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
In the eye.
Wow.
And then the other thing is, there's no better time to take a risk. And businesses are going to be started right now that we're going to be talking about in 10 years. So if you have an idea, you want to give it a shot, there are going to be deals for office space. There's going to be who knows what could happen in terms of great ideas that are being sown right now. If you have one little tiny entrepreneurial bone in your body, give it a shot.
I love that. Love it. You know, I saw it about halfway through the pandemic. I don't know if you saw this. Tom Hanks did a commencement address and did it on video. I don't know if you saw it. And basically the gist of it was that this generation that's graduating from college right now, the young mid-20s crowd, that's who's going to create the post-pandemic world.
Totally.
And that's what, you know, I would have to say, you know, I always ask people, what's making you hopeful? And to me, that's what's making me hopeful is that
also
crowd.
We need to be understanding that there are some people who are going to be, you know, reluctant to come out of their house for a while, or maybe they're reluctant to get back to the gym. Maybe they don't want to take off their mask just yet. But I would say for young people, if you are reticent about getting back out there because, you know, it's scary and, oh, believe me, networking events, like I'd rather die. I can't. I get so much social anxiety, like having to go to a party. We went to a wedding last weekend and I had the most lovely time. But my anxiety about getting ready to go to that wedding just through the roof. I was so late getting ready for the inaugural ball in 2005 that my husband at 6:30 p.m., I was still in my pajamas. He was like, are we going to this thing or not? And I went and I had a good time. Sometimes you just got to take that first step out the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And get back out there. And just remember, you're not the only one feeling that way.
And you know, that's the beauty of this book is you make the reader realize they're not the only ones feeling this way.
Totally not.
And you give them very concrete tools for how to take that first step. Here's how to think about it, but here's how to do it. And like just the list you had in the grocery store, that's huge. That's going to help a lot of people. So
yeah, and there's also another thing. If I know that we got to probably go, but there's I can't remember which chapter 3 or 4. A lot of people might be questioning right now, what do they want to do? How do they want to do that? And in the book, I have a thing called the Whiteboard Incident.
Oh, yes.
It was how Peter helped me figure out what I wanted to do, and that led me to go to Washington to work with Mindy Tucker at the Justice Department, and then on. And it's a way to evaluate your career, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. It's very black and white in terms of there's a numerical figure and a value, and it becomes very clear to you, like, oh, wow, I really don't like what I'm doing, or wow, that's what I want to do. Then maybe at my company, there's a way for me to move into that direction. This is a great time to be talking to your boss about new opportunities, ideas, things you want to do. I'm excited for the young people today. Those that want to take advantage of it, they've got a great opportunity.
Well, you give them a wonderful roadmap in the book.
And
as a former young woman, I just want to say thank you for doing this and for taking the time to help young people move forward. Not everybody thinks that way.
No, my pleasure.
They'd rather write their memoirs and talk about how great they are or something. And you really dug in, and I think you're going to help a lot of people with this.
I hope that it becomes like a go-to book.
I think it will. There's
a couple of young women at Fox. I already read it twice.
See?
And also I found out, Mary Kate, that these young people, they don't take notes anymore like we did. They take screenshots of the pages that they like.
Oh.
More efficient.
Okay. Works for me.
There we go. There's something we can learn too.
It's like Rick from Progressive.
Yes.
Okay. At this point, I think I should hand it back to Max, but I'll say one more time. Thanks for taking the time tonight to join us. And
thank you for
we loved hearing all the great stories. It was delightful.
Well, you're a great interviewer and such a great accomplished writer. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all so much. That was an amazing hour. And I'm actually taking notes. So I've been taking notes because I'm not as young as I used to be, and also because there were so many great lessons from this about taking risks and empowerment and talking to your boss and trying to use this crazy pandemic that we've been going through as a way to, make constructive changes in your life. One takeaway for me is that I've had an exclamation point problem for a really long time. And I think Dana helped me work through that tonight. So when I send out emails,
exclamation points per email. Try to limit yourself.
Dana, I have a major problem. I mean, it's probably 2 exclamation points per paragraph, and I think that all my colleagues and friends would agree with that. But in all seriousness, Dana, that was amazing. It is not just for young women. It is for anybody who has a woman in their life, and that's all of us. And so, I was really excited to be a part of this, and I hope that I can still be on your speed dial when my 9-year-old daughter starts moving into the teenage years, because I think we could all use your advice during that period. So
I love all the girl dads. I think all the things that you're doing are amazing. And I just interviewed Condi Rice for a podcast episode that's coming out around Father's Day, because I wanted to ask her, what was it that her father did or said or advised that helped create Condi Rice? And
good question.
There's so many great girl dads out there that are helping the next Condi Rice. It's really impressive, and thanks for what you do.
Well, great, and no, that's a great story, and I need to go back and reread the book again, because as a parent, you have these pressures, and as a girl dad, you have extra pressures. So this is going to help me get through those teenage years. So Dana, thank you so much. That was incredible.
Thank you, everybody.
And Mary Kate, I just want to thank you. Proud that you're our new chair of the advisory council at the George and Barbara Bush Foundation. I think we found a new role for you moving forward, so we're going to get you back on screen as much as we can. But that was...
Well, I'm looking forward to working together, Max. It's going to be great.
No, that was extraordinary. And this event tonight is a perfect segue to our next virtual event. And she was mentioned many times in this conversation, but the great Jean Becker, she's coming out with a new book, The Man I Knew, The Amazing Story of George H.W. Bush's Post-Presidency. And so that'll be on June 3rd at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be a virtual event. I'm going to have an opportunity to play Mary Kate in that conversation with Jean, and so I encourage all of you to sign up for it. If you didn't get the invite, please go to our website. It's on there, but it'll be a really great conversation. And I just, again, want to thank you all for spending this time with us today. And at the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, our goal is to amplify the legacies of George and Barbara Bush. And a lot of those legacies, values, and ideals were talked about tonight in terms of putting other people before yourself, in terms of being character first in terms of friendships. And so I know that myself and all of our colleagues are proud to be a part of that mission every day, to support the Bush Presidential Library, to support the Bush School at Texas A&M. We're just so proud to have that calling and to be able to put George and Barbara Bush forward. And frankly, with all the challenges we've got in this country and around the world, I think we all need more George and Barbara Bush right now. So again, thank you all for the time tonight. Please tell your friends about this. It'll be on our website later this week, an extraordinary evening. And I hope you all have a great week. Talk soon and come visit us when the library reopens, hopefully this summer. Bye-bye.